A few months back, I did a video on silver crowns. These are the largest circulating silver coin from countries all around the world, kind of equivalent to the American silver dollar. They circulated from really honestly probably the 1700s up until the 1900s. And they were kind of the foundation of the economies for lots of countries around the world. Roughly the same purity, roughly the same size, because they often have the ruler of the country's face on them. They're kind of generically called crowns, although in the case of the British pieces, they literally are called crowns. But just as with the American silver dollar has its subsidiary coinage, that is the half dollar, the quarter, and the dime, all of the countries around the world that circulated crowns have their own subsidiary coinage as well. They're kind of fractional pieces. And I haven't really talked about them very much, but they are a fascinating part of history. They are a fun way to start collecting silver. They do have advantages and disadvantages, so that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to talk about those smaller silver circulating coins. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dub C, and I want to thank you for being with me here today. If you're one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys. As always promised, this is going to be a fun one. I know looking at some of these historical pieces is a lot of fun. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I'd like to encourage you to go ahead and click on that subscription button, hit the notification and like buttons. Also, love to have you be part of this community. Remember, it doesn't cost anything to subscribe to a channel. It's just a way to show support. And I like to begin my videos where I can with a couple of definitions and a disclaimer. That disclaimer is I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And I also like to begin my videos with a couple of definitions that we can kind of fold back into the subject that we're talking about. I find this is a great way to kind of stimulate those parts of your brain, get you thinking about these things, see if you can see how these definitions relate to what we're going to be talking about. So the first one is purity. We talk about purity a lot on this channel, and if you are a precious metal stacker, you are used to the idea of purity. If you're not quite familiar, every coin that is made out of a precious metal has its own purity. That is the percentage or the ratio of the amount of precious metals compared to base metals. A lot of coins are alloyed with things like copper, sometimes nickel, sometimes other elements, because it gives them durability. We want coins to last. Remember, these were circulating, and circulating coins are some of the hardest working machines that humans have ever invented. So to be able to keep those really fine, beautiful details, these coins have been alloyed with different metals over time. Generally speaking, it's right around 90%, but these purities can differ from country to country and even from coin to coin, and we'll talk about purities a little bit later. The other idea kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of purity, and that is actual silver weight. Sometimes we see that abbreviated as ASW. When you're comparing coins from different countries, or even countries within coins within a country that are made of a different alloy, it's important to compare their actual silver weight. That is the amount of pure silver that is contained within these coins. While we understand that these are often alloyed with copper or other metals, we don't really care about those metals. We are just interested in the silver value. So because these have different shapes, different sizes, different weights, and different purities, we want to do an apples to apples comparison. We want to look at their actual silver weight, the amount of pure silver that each one of these pieces contains within them. So we'll talk about actual silver weight a lot in this video as we get a little bit deeper into it. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages? Let's just take a look at some of these first off. This is such a fun and interesting area of collecting or stacking precious metals, and this can really lead you into that crossing of that bridge that I talk about all the time between stacking precious metals and collecting coins. They are hand in hand, tied together, and I think that this is a really great opportunity for you to think about these in those terms. This is an example of a British shilling from 1894 versus a standing Liberty quarter. This would probably be from the 1920s. You can see just how similar these pieces are. This is an example of how all of these countries that had crowns also had these subsidiary pieces, and they can be quite beautiful. They are an exciting area to stack and collect. This is a really beautiful piece from France. This is what we call a 50 centimes piece, this from 1907. Most of the smaller pieces that you see here that I've laid out, I have collected over many, many years often selecting them when I'm buying other pieces because they stood out for one reason or another. And the tone on that one is just so beautiful. This beautiful woman on this French coin is called La Sameuse. She is the sower. She's actually sowing seeds, and I love that tone. Just looks like she's walking in the sun in the dawn. I love that. So a 1907 50 centimes piece. This is typical of the type of subsidiary coins you would see from other countries around the world. Compare it with an American mercury dime. It gives you an idea. But the piece here on the left, the French piece, is 83.5% pure versus the American piece here on the right at 90% pure. So you start to see those differences in purities. It's not that big of a concern once you know their actual silver weight, and you can actually stack your precious metals based on the amount of silver that they contain. Once again, we don't really care so much about the copper or the nickel or whatever else they're alloyed with. We are interested in their silver weight, their actual silver weight. 2.5 grams of 83.5%, which means the actual silver weight, which seems a little bit strange to be talking in terms of troy ounces, but it's 0.0671 of a troy ounce of pure silver. So right about the same amount as I'm filming today, $2.04 worth of silver versus about $2.19 worth of silver in the mercury dime. But the difference is in the premium. Premium is the amount you have to pay over and above the precious metal value in order to buy one of these pieces. Premium takes into account the seller's profit, also keeping their lights on, paying their bills, that kind of thing. So while this piece you could probably find at a local coin shop for very little premium, sometimes not even a premium in some cases, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, you can actually buy these below their premiums or below their silver content. This piece probably cost you right around $2, maybe $2.50. Right now, my local dealers have mercury dimes for as much as $3 or even $4 a piece. So while the amount of silver they contain is almost identical, the premiums on these pieces much, much higher. Not so much on the 50 centimes piece and the other types of coins that you would see in these smaller subsidiary coins. There's a term that we use sometimes called miners, M-I-N-O-R-S. We're not talking about a silver miner out there in the field with his pickaxe and his mule. A miner just means a smaller coin. Technically, a miner is a coin that's made out of base metal, so that would be copper or nickel, like a penny or a nickel. In this case, I don't mind using the word miner to talk about the difference between a crown and the smaller coins. I think it's just an easy shorthand. So if you hear me using the word miner in this video, that's really what I'm talking about. These smaller silver coins, smaller than a crown size. I've got some other examples to take a quick look at. This is a really interesting piece. This is from Southern Rhodesia. And while you're looking at the obverse of the coin, it looks like a British coin, right? That's King George V, a typical silver coin from this period of time. But the interesting thing about this is that Southern Rhodesia was only a country from 1923 to about 1965. So these pieces have tons of history. They were witness to so much history, the same as with the crowns. And as a matter of fact, if we think of the crowns as being a pretty large amount of money, not really the kind of thing you would spend on a daily basis if you were just going to the grocery store, to the market to buy some eggs or whatever else it is, the silver crowns, a little bit more of a large currency value. The miners, these smaller pieces, the kinds of things that the average person would have had in their pocket, right? This is the kind of thing that really was witness to things like revolutions and assassinations and stock market crashes and voyages across the ocean. These were the kinds of things that were in the pockets of everyday people, the kinds of money that were spent regularly. So as with the Rhodesian piece, witnesses to history in a way that maybe some of these crowns really didn't see the history, and that's one of the most fascinating things about them. They also could have serious numismatic potential. We're talking about buying these as opposed to maybe a modern bullion piece, a modern silver round or a bar. Those pieces are being made constantly. I talk about that a lot on the channel. We talk about attrition. The fact that pieces like these, some of them 100, 200 years old, they are melted, destroyed, lost every single day. But a modern bullion piece, they continue to make those every single day, every single hour of the day. So while that is an ever-increasing supply, those modern bullion pieces, these beautiful, interesting, historic silver coins, whether they're crowns or the miners, an ever-decreasing supply, and that puts pressure on the prices. That doesn't necessarily mean that every single one of them is going to have value, but at least the potential is there, and I like that idea of potential. Remember that nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can actually anticipate if something is going to go up in value, but I love the potential anyway. These pieces have one unique aspect that is not shared with a lot of modern bullion pieces, and that is that you can touch them. You can actually lay your hands on them. In a world where we're talking about collecting coins and we often have pieces that are inside little plastic flips or sometimes sealed within a modern coin slab, the idea of actually being able to lay hands on the very pieces that were witnesses to history, I don't think that can be understated. It's important to kind of sometimes feel these things, to acknowledge this was what people were spending, not just to look at a picture in a book, but to actually place it in your hand and to have that experience, that visceral, tactile feel, to actually know that these pieces were the very pieces that were spent 100, 150, 200 years ago. It's a fascinating thing, and I really feel it's important sometimes. We get so detached from our coins sometimes to actually be able to lay hands on them, to actually feel them, I do think is important, and I think that's an interesting and exciting thing. And I love the idea that these things can be exciting. They can motivate you. They can really get those juices flowing, get your heart pumping. That is fun. I love that. Never forget that about precious metals. There are some distinct disadvantages to these pieces too, though. As we said earlier, these pieces vary wildly in terms of their purities, and that's one of the reasons we talked about purities before. This is an interesting piece. This is a 50 kopeck piece. Do you recognize that writing, that Cyrillic around the outside? This is a Russian piece, not a Soviet piece. This is actually pre-Russian Revolution, 1899, 50 kopeck. This purity is actually 90%. So this is made out of the same purity that America's circulating silver coins were made out of. This is an example of a 1911 50-cent piece from Newfoundland. So if you are Canadian or if you like the British protectorates and part of the Commonwealth, this would be a piece maybe that interests you. This piece actually made out of 92.5% pure silver. We talked about the Centime piece, the French piece, 83.5% silver. And then this is an example of a slightly later piece. This is a florin from New Zealand. I like this piece. I like the staining on this. I like the dark color for this. You know that this piece has never been cleaned, right? This piece is only 500 fine, or 50% pure. So that is one of the distinct disadvantages of these smaller pieces, and frankly, the crowns also, right? They are of a different variety, size, weight, purity, when it comes to their actual silver weight. And that's why the ASW is so important. If it's really significant to you, if you really want to know exactly how much of a precious metal you have, I like to keep these, my larger pieces at least, in an Excel file. And I just insert a formula that helps me determine how much actual silver is in them. I don't necessarily do that with every single one of these pieces, the smaller pieces, but it is a way to calculate the amount of silver that you have. It should be seen as a disadvantage because that's the way that dealers see this, the different purities, the different weights, the different sizes. And that actually is not just between countries and countries. Just as with the American silver half dollars from 1964, the last year that we made those out of 90%, but then for about the next 5 years, we made them out of 40% pure silver. So even within countries, some of these purities, some of these weights differ, and it's important to understand that. It's important to be able to find that information if that really matters to you. And the reason I emphasize that is because I like having a handful of these miners so I can look at the history and compare and contrast. One of the great things about these is that when you're looking at these beautiful pieces, you can find pieces that work within series. And if you are the kind of person that really likes series, let's talk about a coin that has very similar styles. That is an English crown featuring a slightly later Queen Victoria, and this is a gold sovereign featuring the same. This is the same sovereign, the same literal sovereign on this coin. But you can also find these pieces in their silver miners. That's a great example of it. That is just a fun way to collect. There's so much history in these pieces to be able to see that even within countries, you can often make entire sets out of these smaller pieces that complement maybe the larger pieces that you're talking about. So while the weights and purities does make some difference, I like having a selection of these, and I don't really care that much about them as long as I know that they are, for the most part, somewhere around 90% pure. I don't mind having the occasional piece that just has a really interesting design on it, like this New Zealand piece. I don't have a lot of these of lower purity, but I do have some if the design is of interest to me. So some things to be aware of. If you are looking at these at a local coin shop, and I'll talk about some of the tips that I use when I'm buying these pieces. If you're looking at these at a local coin shop and you're able to pick up some of these and you go home and look at the guidebooks, there's the catalog of world coins and other resources that you can find these pieces in. Be cautious when you're looking at those prices. If you are familiar with the Red Book, this is a source for American coins that I use several times a day, every single day. But one of the things that I don't really pay much attention to is the actual prices that they give for those pieces. It's good in determining whether or not something is rare or not rare, right? If you can find a series, one piece is valued at $5 while one is valued at $500, then you know that that other piece, the $500 piece, is especially scarce. And that's a great tip. It's something to look for. The same is true of these pieces. In the guidebooks that I've seen, these prices are often ridiculously inflated. So don't take the actual price to heart. But by the same way that I use the Red Book, if you find a piece that has an unexpectedly high value, then you know that maybe that's a slightly better piece. Maybe handle that one a little bit more carefully and don't just pick it up by the handful. That's a great tip. Those guidebooks can often be off. So if you buy a coin for $3 or $4 at a local coin store, and you see in the guidebook that it's worth $500, just be careful. It might not actually be worth that much. The real world is best captured when you're looking at closed auction sales. eBay is a great tool for that. These pieces can be hard to sell for the same reason that they are inexpensive. And again, I'll talk about that in just a second. Dealers often discount these because it's difficult to look these up and find out how much silver they contain, to try to grade them and determine what grade on that Sheldon grading scale they are, to see if they've got any kind of a damage. So if the dealer has a hard time selling these, you can bet that the dealer is going to buy them for you from you at significantly less than their silver content most of the time. If you're buying these like I have over many, many years when silver is down as low as $4, $5, $6 an ounce, I'm certainly not going to lose any money on these. But if you think of these as a modern silver bullion vehicle that you can buy today and sell tomorrow, maybe capture a little bit of a gain, it's really probably not the case with these pieces. So I wouldn't use them as that kind of tool. Just be aware that that is definitely a disadvantage to these pieces. And I said that I would talk about some of the tips that I use when buying these. I don't want to get too nerdy and too specific and clinical about these. A lot of this has to do with how they move you, with how these pieces make you feel. A lot of these pieces I picked up just because I thought they were so fascinating. There's something really interesting about each and every one of these pieces, whether it's the tone, if it's the age, if it's the really tiny little size, if it's the ruler, and I like a lot of the rulers that you see on these pieces. There's just something really fascinating about each and every one of these pieces. The fact that I was able to pick them up for their melt value just adds interest to it. That makes them so cool. So tips. Talk to your dealer. Most dealers have a box that they sent off to be smelted on a regular basis, whether it's every 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it is. And often these miners, because it does take so much time to try to look these up and find out what they are, they will just simply chuck these into a melt box. It's not quite as mercenary as you might think. When somebody brings in a collection to a dealer, often the dealer recognizes that the large pieces, whether it's the silver dollars or the crowns or the gold coins, those are the ones that are going to make them their money. That's their bread and butter. But if somebody brings in a collection and they've got a handful of these smaller silver pieces, it doesn't make sense for your dealer to buy these, to research them, to catalog them, put them in a flip and put them in their display case, and then wait the year, 2 years, 3 years for somebody to come along and ask the dealer if they happen to have a Southern Rhodesian shilling. It's just never going to happen. And even if it does, if they bought these pieces at maybe 50% of their melt value, that's probably a pretty good estimate. And they pay $2, $3, $4 for one of these small pieces. If they sell it for twice that much, $6, and it takes them 3 or 4 years to sell it, there is zero money in it. They've taken way too much time, tied up their resources. It just doesn't make sense. they're going to buy them because it helps them get into these larger collections. And again, they're kind of doing a service to the people who bring these in. They recognize their bread and butter pieces. What are they going to do with these? They chuck them into a box, they send them to the smelter, and they have them melted down. But you can use that to your advantage if your dealer is one of the folks that does that. And in my experience, probably 75-80% of dealers do just that. They put these into a box and they ship them off every once in a while. But when they ship them off, they've got to pay shipping. They've got to pay handling, which is expensive when you're talking about a box full of silver coins, right? You've got to insure that, and it's very heavy. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy. And then once they actually get to the smelter is probably going to pay them maybe 80% of their silver value. Remember, these are differing silver purities. Their actual silver weights vary quite a bit. So they're lucky if the silver smelter is going to pay them maybe 80%. And by the time they actually get that check cut, it gets sent back to them and they can deposit it. They've wasted a lot of time, energy, and effort to get rid of these pieces that they are not making a single penny on in the first place. And that's where you come in. This is where you can actually help your dealer. Ask them if they do this. Ask them. It's difficult, especially if you're an introvert, if you've never done something like this before. I get it. That's tough to do. Get through that. Take $50 or $100 in cash with you if you possibly can. Next time you go to your dealer shop, ask them if they have just such a program in place where they ship stuff off, and they may begrudgingly open up this box because this is garbage to them. They don't want their customers looking at this dirty laundry. But you want that dirty laundry. Ask them if you can take a look at it, and then offer to buy these pieces at full melt. Right, you're not paying more than the silver value for these pieces. In fact, in some cases, you might even squeak by a little bit less than melt value. Maybe you offer 95% of melt, but don't push your luck. I want you to walk out of the store with these pieces. So your dealer sees this to his advantage if he can actually put two and two together. All the time, energy, effort wasted shipping these off, paying the shipping, paying the handling, and then getting maybe 80% of the melt value, versus you right here, right now, with cash in hand, paying them 100% of the melt value. It's a win-win, and this is a great win-win because you get awesome pieces, maybe even some of these crowns, for their melt value. And the dealer gets cash right then and there and doesn't have to worry about shipping and handling and wait times and the smaller percentage. It's a win-win. Now, don't tell anybody that old Dub C told you that tip. That is a fantastic tip. You can apply that to just about everything in your life. But definitely understand that people have killed for this kind of information, so keep it under your hat. My subscribers only, right? The best tip that I can possibly give you. In my experience, condition on these pieces really does matter. Some of these pieces are battered and bruised. Some of these pieces are bent and holed. Now, when it comes to things like Spanish colonial pieces that go back to the 1700s, I certainly don't mind if some of those pieces have a hole all the way through them. But when we're talking about these smaller silver coins from maybe the 1850s or so on, I really want these to have a little bit more meat on the bone. I think that you can find these pieces that actually do have a fair amount of detail, that do have a little bit of history to them, and that you're not missing out too much by buying them if they are in decent shape. Here's an example of an actual Soviet coin. You can see the hammer and the sickle there. I said I don't want pieces with holes in them. Of course, there are some exceptions when they're made with holes in them already. So condition matters a little bit. If you find a piece that moves you emotionally and it's really well worn, I get it. But for the most part, I want to find these pieces on that Sheldon grading scale of maybe 1 to 70, somewhere in the 30 to maybe 50 range. I like the fact that these are circulated and that I can touch them. I know I keep on harping on that and I keep on doing that. See how tactile these are? You want to reach out, you want to touch these pieces. And if they were uncirculated, I wouldn't want to do that, right? I would feel kind of bad about putting my unwashed hands on them. But when it comes to these pieces in a little bit more of a circulated grade, I love the fact that I can actually lay hands on them. So while I want them to be at least a little bit circulated, I don't want them to be uncirculated. I also don't want them to be damaged, bent, or broken, that kind of thing. Your condition, your position might vary a little bit from that. One of the most difficult things to do when you're talking about these fun pieces, and boy, these are fun, this is just so exciting to actually look at and touch, is that they are addictive. And I mean that in the nicest way. If you start to think of these as your silver stack and you are able to get these for even a little bit less than their silver value, you're going to start thinking that you're getting away with murder here. And that's not the case. Remember what I said. These are difficult to sell. This takes more time to sell. Your dealer's going to buy these back from you, if they will even buy them back from you, probably at a discount beneath back of their melt value. Keep that in mind. Don't delude yourself into thinking that you're building a huge stack of precious metals for less than their melt value, because the reality of it is that this is not going to answer that question. It's not going to check those boxes. These are going to be more difficult to sell. You're probably not going to get the full silver value when you do sell them. And because of that, as hard as it is, try to limit the amount of pieces in this area that you buy. If it's exciting, if it gets you thinking, it gets your heart pumping, you love the history behind it, you love doing the research. Remember, old Dub C always says, always be learning. And I think this is an important catalyst to that. This can really make you excited, make you open up those books, go to those websites and do the research. But limit yourself. This should not be probably the core of your precious metal stack. This is the spice. This is the icing on the cake. Think of it in those terms. I don't want to see you get burned when and if you actually have to sell these pieces. It's a little bit of a word of caution. Have fun with it for sure, but try to limit yourself a little bit. So there we go. An exciting kind of trip into the smaller silver coins that are the subsidiary pieces, the equivalent of those dimes, those quarters, those half dollars, going back hundreds of years sometimes. Lots of history, lots of interest, lots of beautiful designs, and they are so inexpensive. This is so much fun. It really is. There are numismatic pieces here, sure. I do have some pieces that are representing this type of smaller silver coins that really do have significant numismatic value and potential. And I don't treat them like this, right? This is really just for those pieces that are average circulated, and this is one of those examples where I don't mind touching them. I think that's so much fun. Do you have any of these pieces? Have you started to stack these world silver coins? Do you think these are as fascinating and exciting as I do? Which ones are your favorite? Which ones that you've seen here today are your favorite? I'd love to know those comments, and I want to have you share those comments with everybody else. Look through these comments down below. Take a look and see what else people are excited by. See if there's a series maybe you didn't know about that's worth exploring. I think that's fun. Again, always be learning. If you have questions about them, chances are, in this case, I probably can't help you because there are so many of them, right? That's the same reason why your dealers will discount these. It is so difficult to be an expert in one country's coinage. Imagine trying to be an expert in 300 countries' coinage. That's a positive and a negative. One of the reasons why you can snap these up so cheap sometimes. But if you have a general question, a broad question about these, definitely leave that down below. You know, as I'm fond of saying, if you have a question about these, chances are somebody else has that question too. Let's see if we can answer it for everybody. If you have suggestions of other videos or even video series you'd like to see me make in the world of precious metals or rare coins, leave that comment down below also. And if I'm able to make a video or series based on your suggestion, I'll give you a great big shout out. This is your last chance, opportunity in this video at least, to go ahead and click on that subscription button. Love to have you be part of this community. Remember, it doesn't cost anything, just a way of showing support. Love to have you join us. And I premiere videos most Friday evenings, brand new videos. I'm often there at the premiere to answer questions while the video is showing. And sometimes we even go live in a live stream immediately after the video premieres. So if you want to mark on your calendar, check back in with me, hit that notification button. There's a good chance that this video is premiering on a Friday night, and there's a good chance we're going to go live afterwards. And I would love to be able to speak with you in person. Mark your calendars, join us on Friday nights. Always be learning, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as we go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.